Hello, today is November 16th, and we are reading our Psalm for Christ the King and Native American Sunday. Our Psalm is Psalm 93. The Lord is King, robed in majesty. The Lord is robed in majesty and armed with strength. The Lord has made the world so sure it cannot be moved. Ever since the world began, your throne has been established. You are from everlasting. The waters have lifted up, O Lord, the waters have lifted up their voice, the waters have lifted up their pounding waves. Mightier than the sound of many waters, mightier than the breakers of the sea, mightier is the Lord who dwells on high. Your testimonies are very sure, and holiness befits your house, O Lord, forever and forevermore. So this psalm, Psalm 93, is a fairly short psalm. But it is a psalm that kicks off a section of the book of Psalms. 93 to 99 is a crucial part of book 4. And these psalms are collectively known as the enthronement psalms. The enthronement psalms. And they are, as you might have guessed, about God on the throne, God as king. There is some commenters, people who study the Psalms. Um, there's an argument or a theory that there was an enthronement festival similar to the festivals now celebrated or better known now. But there is an argument that these psalms would have been used at an enthronement festival that celebrates both the human king that would be sitting on the throne in Jerusalem, the king of all of Judah, or in the time of David, all of both the northern kingdom of Israel and Judah, but and in that same at the same time celebrating the Lord as the supreme king of all creation. And so, we have no evidence for this festival being in existence, but the fact that we have this significant chunk of the Psalms dedicated to this theme of God as king means that it is a central, or at least an important, way of understanding who God is in relationship to the world. And so we talked yesterday about Daniel and the language of Daniel being, there's a concern about the empires that Daniel was aware of, those human conquerors that fought amongst each other, the tumult they caused for the peoples that they had conquered, just the death and destruction that comes from the empires of the ancient world. And Daniel showed an alternative, another kind of king that establishes not more turmoil, not more domination, but peace, stability, that is above the human din of politics. And here in Psalm 93, we have that same idea. The Lord is king, robed in majesty. The Lord is robed in majesty and armed with strength. But this is not about human politics. This psalm does not have the same concerns as Daniel. Instead, this psalm is about God is king over all of creation. And it is a psalm that reflects on God's relationship with creation as creator. So I want to draw your attention especially that we have that first phrase, that God is king, the Lord is king, and his throne has been established. And then in verse 3, in verse 4, it talks about the waters and that repetition of the waters have lifted up, the waters have lifted up, the waters have lifted up their pounding waves. And there's a theme throughout Scripture, separate from this psalm, that identifies the waters as the forces of chaos. Anything that nature does out there in the world that produces chaos and destruction. We just came through hurricane season in the Atlantic. That ended about a month ago, and hurricane season is extremely destructive. We have wildfires that have now begun to go down, but at that same period this fall, we had extremely dangerous and large wildfires in the west of our country. I lived on the North Shore in northern Minnesota, and where I lived, I was very close, or I could see Lake Superior from the hill that I lived on. And there on the North Shore, they don't get any ice buildup at all. Whereas on the South Shore, in certain places, especially on the Wisconsin part of the South Shore, the way that winds and prevailing weather patterns blow, it allows ice to build up quite a ways out. On the North Shore, the wind is so continually in the same direction, and the weather has such a destructive pattern that ice is never allowed to form. And in the middle of winter, when the winds come in, blowing blowing from the north off of the Canadian plain down from Ontario, and it's 30 below, and the waves are crashing up and pushing boulders into the street in Grand Marais, Minnesota. You get a sense of the power of the world. We live in a world that is shaped by extremely powerful natural forces which we are unable to control. And for the people who wrote the Psalms, not only they were in the same boat as we are, that they are unable to control the extreme damage weather and natural disasters can cause. And so they identify chaos and destruction with the waters, with the sea, with storms, with floods. In ancient Israel, they had a dry season, and especially in the south of Israel, in the Negev, they had a rainy season, and that rainy season, flash floods were extremely common, and they would sweep everything away. And that is still the case in that part of the world. And so this is a psalm that testifies to God's power over even the chaotic power of creation. That God is king even over the world, the natural world. And instead of the waters being lifted up in a flood or in a great wave, instead the waters are lifted up in praise. And we testify that God is mightier than the breakers of the sea. Mightier is the Lord who dwells on high. In the face of natural disasters, God is with us and God protects us. And this psalm is testifying that not even natural disasters can separate us from God's love and God's presence. God is king. And because of that, we can find comfort at the throne of God, even in the face of the dangers of the world. I hope you are having a good week. I'll see you later.